you have any example of which is an ideal example to the kind of socialism that you were talking about? Is there? We know that Russia made mistake. You mentioned Cambodia and China, but do you have any example of something that is close to the kind of socialism?
Yeah, answer that in. You see, I think it's a work in progress. We've got to develop a model of socialism that is appropriate for the 21st century and for our country. That's, I think, something that's going to be evolved through a process. But I think what has happened, of course, you can say like Russia, there were mistakes. But also you look at the positive points of Russia. The positive point is Russia proved, 1917 to the 70s, that you don't need capitalists to develop a modern industrial economy. They were able to develop a space program, a weapons program, everything on their own without capitalists. So capitalists are superfluous. I mean, it's not to say there was no gulags, there were gulags, but this proves one thing. Then if you look at, say, Cuba, for example, in Cuba you can see healthcare, the indices of health, of education in Cuba is so much better than even in developing countries, other developed countries, which have a GDP much higher than Cuba, despite the blockade. So that again shows the economic model of socialism. Then you go on, I think you talk looking at Venezuela and Bolivia, where Latin Americans are trying a different model, where they're using the electoral process, mobilizing the people, and using that to bring certain changes towards socialism. Maybe that's something that we've got to look at very closely, because I think that is what our population will accept. I think the time is gone when we can say, look, we are a central committee, we know everything, follow us, give us absolute power. I think that is no longer going to work. Yes, cannot. I think no longer. And also that corrupts. We've seen how that kind of methodology actually corrupts the whole process. The bureaucrat leaders, the managerial class become a caste by themselves, and they start, getting more of the surplus. There needs to be a check and balance. And I think what is being shown in Bolivia, Venezuela, is where the whole process of democratic participation is being used, to deepen the transformation, and also to prevent the right wing from using the military to a military takeover. It is the people who are mobilized, who are supporting, who are stabilizing the regime, you see. So I think we're going to go along those ways, And I think for people who say socialism and religion I think there's a lot of similarities, a lot of points of convergence between religion and socialism. And there should be no reason why we can't work together to build a better society.
Two very popular questions, again, asked by the youth, who are actually very interested in socialism. One is that a very popular question comes is that they were asking, like, the idea of a fair distribution of wealth, meaning that if I work harder, will I be paid the same as those who work less, with less responsibility? I mean, this is always the main perception of socialism. And how would you counter that? How would you answer the country?
I think if you look at some of the things that Castro is talking about in Cuba, he is talking about how labor should be rewarded. Labor should be rewarded. And if you don't labor, see, what we are against is when you let someone else labor and you exploit him and take the surplus. Like what capitalism? So capitalism, we're against that, you see. We are against, for example, speculation. We're against where, for example, because of your connections with a certain agency, you're able to sell a product at 10 times the price. We are against that kind of cheating where you're actually gaining not from your labor. But I think the principle of just rewards for labor, you work longer, you work harder, and you're rewarded, is not against socialism at all. But I think we'll also want to say that we should have some of the surplus be used for those who cannot labor, those who are sick, those who are disabled, the single mothers who need help. So society must say, okay, for the able-bodied people who are working, we reward you as how hard you work. For those who cannot work because of illness or whatever, old age, that's why we look after them, isn't it? So there can be, and I think coming around to this, I think the whole issue of the market in socialism, also we got to look at that again. Not market in the form, in the sense of you can have a chance to exploit people. Market in the sense of distribution of goods. That I think has got a place to play in a socialist economy.
Another question is, they were going through, when we were raising our fuel price, they were going through the current fuel price around the world, and they realized that Venezuela is selling like 16 cents per liter. So they are asking, how can that happen? Another thing is that when they realize that medical facilities in Cuba are free, so because coming from a capitalist country that practice capitalism, they don't understand how can that happen. Meaning that how can medical facilities, medical services can be provided free, and how would a country, how can a country sell fuel at 16 cents per liter? So these are the questions that they are answering. So you mind answering how can that happen? How can Cuba afford to do that? How can
Malaysia can afford to do that. Malaysia is even richer than Cuba, in terms of per capita.
That's the actual.
You see, if in Malaysia, you see, our per capita is what, $27,000 per person per year. You times that by 5, you get 135,000 for a family of 5 per year. Divided by 12, you get about $11,000
Something like that.
per family of 5 people, 3 children. That's the wealth in our country. But the number of families getting less than 2,000 is already 40%. The number of families getting less than 3,000 is 60%. So where's all the excess money going? So I think, if we, let's say Pakatan takes over, we also got to think, if we put a very high minimum wage and all our goods are priced very high, we lose our export market, also we can be in a problem. But there's another way in which we can use the surplus for our people is by subsidizing the basics. Subsidized health, subsidized education, subsidized public transport, subsidized housing. Let's say for each house, you only pay half the price of the house. The state uses the surplus to pay the other half. So you make the cost of living more affordable. You don't have to raise wages too high. I think we are, as long as we are in a capitalist international world, you've got to consider, let's say if you raise your wages sky high, in a fair, make it fair to get a good income. The problem is we may lose our export markets. We may then, so we have deindustrialization, we have problems. So we have to think of like Venezuela, for example, or Cuba. We give free things. One more thing I think we should give free is pension. Let's say in Malaysia, I think we should start, in fact, brought this up in Parliament, that for everyone above 70 years old, the state should pay $200 a month. Automatically. So that means now, for us, what makes us very anxious about the future is, one is our children's education, our health needs when you're older, and then when you get old, how are you going to live? If the state says, don't worry, health needs, I will take care. Children's education, there is provided. And when you're older, you get a small pension, a stipend. Half the anxieties, or more than half the anxieties about life, are reduced already. So the surplus that we are having in this country, I just mentioned about you get $11,000 a month per family, but you're only getting, so many people getting so little. That surplus can be used for all, let's say. And that lessens the pressure on everyone. I think we can do it. If we have the political will, we can do it for the whole population.
So you're saying instead of raising wages, we should subsidize?
I think we should raise the wages to some extent. But raising the wages, we also got to see the impact of it on industries. You see, for example, even let's say we have a factory in Malaysia making shoes and selling to Malaysian population. If we raise wages and the cost of shoes for that factory goes up, and the shoes from China and Vietnam are cheaper than that, then that factory won't be able to compete. Unless you put up, so then you got to say, okay, if you're going to do that, then we have put up barriers, we put up protection, we bring back tariffs. But we already signed a lot of agreements saying we're lowering our tariffs. So you got to, it's a very technical thing. But the issue is, how do we get the surplus of our country to benefit our people? And One is more wages, other one is this kind of benefits, you see, old age pension, subsidized housing, but talking about petrol, I think we're running short of petrol in the world, So I think raising the price of petrol may be actually a good thing. Once you have a public transport system in place. So we should raise the cost of that because it's much more petrol efficient to use public transport. You can't keep on burning up fuel. It's going to run out anyway,